Welcome back, folks. My name's Shane. In today's video, I'm going to share with you my thoughts on the Panasonic Lumix GH7 and why this is an absolute no-brainer if you're thinking of getting into YouTube. This camera has by far the least amount of compromises out there. And I've shot with everything, including the Sony FX3, the A7S III. I've got a Sony ZV-E1 over here, and I've shot with micro four thirds, full frame, and everything else when it comes to the Lumix cameras. I think this is an absolute gem, and I'll explain why. What I'm also going to do at the end of this video is give you an option to the GH7. So if this is out of your price point, which is understandable, these are kind of expensive for a micro four thirds camera, I'm going to give you an alternative that's definitely worth checking out that I'm shooting with right now that will almost give you indistinguishable results. So let's do it. Let's talk about some reality, some facts, and all the hype train that you see on YouTube. So a lot of people will dismiss micro four thirds considering it's got a smaller sensor than that of full frame and APS-C. But there's some benefits that come along with that. The truth is, either your content's good or it's not. And if you're shooting content on a micro four thirds camera, a full frame camera, or APS-C camera, and the content sucks, no one's going to watch it. So that's the first thing. I grew another channel over 100,000 subscribers shooting micro four thirds before I went over to full frame. It might have been 150,000 subs. I'm not exactly sure at which point I switched systems, but at the end of the day, I could have stuck with micro four thirds, and I'm starting to realize that more and more. So don't worry about the sensor size. There's some clear advantages with this sensor, with this camera body, and all of the features built into this camera that you won't get from a lot of full frame cameras without paying another $2,000 on top of this. So just keep those things in mind. That's Australian dollars, by the way. The most important thing to consider anytime you're buying a camera body, and one of the reasons why I consider the GH7 an awesome option in 2025 and beyond, is the fact that you can find so many affordable lenses for this particular mount. Micro four thirds is full of first and third party options out there that will give you excellent results. A lot of people seem to think that some of the lenses won't give you the same sort of look or background blur and all that kind of stuff as full frame, but you can find them, and I'll show you some examples of those in a moment. But the great news is you can find lenses like this little 25mm f1.7. It's an absolute steal. It's super inexpensive, and it will give you that classic 50mm equivalent. Now, if you're not sure about any of this stuff, you've got to times the focal length of the lens by 2 to get the full frame equivalent in terms of field of view. So this is giving us a 50mm, or that nifty 50, but it says 25 on there. So just keep that in mind. For its size, weight, and price, this lens is unmatched on the market. I haven't used another one that comes close to this considering its price. And yes, it has autofocus. So if you want to be holding things up in front of your face, or you just want to be behind the camera and get autofocus, this is a really great choice. Now, if you're thinking about getting into vlogging, this is the lens that you want. This is the 9mm f1.7 prime, and this will give you an 18mm field of view, which is a super wide angle lens. And if you pair this with the GH7, the results are almost unmatched. It looks so nice. Now, I have a full frame camera system with an 18mm f1.8 prime, which I really like as well. But this lens is about half or a third of the size of that. So you're saving the weight here when it comes to the lens. There's no real sacrifice in terms of optical quality. There will be a bit of a difference in the shallow depth of field look, but this is still capable of giving you excellent results when you're doing any sort of handheld vlogging. So if you're someone who's going to be doing travel vlogs or anything outside where you want a super wide angle field of view lens, this combination right here is an absolute winner. While these prime lenses are nice and small, take a look at this 24-70 equivalent lens. This is the 12-35mm f2.8, and this is a constant f2.8 lens. So 12-35 allows you to get that 24-70 field of view, which is super versatile. Whether you're vlogging or you just want to take a one and done travel lens with you, this is great. Now, this is version 2. I also own version 3, but if you're just getting into it, looking for a lens that will give you, a good look here in the studio, as well as giving you excellent results outside, I would highly recommend just getting version 2. It will save you a few bucks on the most part. If they're the same price wherever you live, like I was lucky enough to score the Leica version, then get the Leica version. It is a little bit nicer, but this is still a really great lens, and it's one of the lenses I take with me anytime I travel. One of the things you'll often hear on YouTube, which I think is completely overblown, is the low light performance on micro four thirds cameras. Yeah, sure, some are bad, and if you go back a few years, they got worse, but the latest cameras are really solid. Now, I'm in a studio with very little lighting in here. It might look like I've got a lot of lighting, but my ISO is at 200. How does it look? I'm sure it looks fine. And the great news is if you want to get even better low light performance or get more shallow depth of field, you can find lenses like this. Now, this is the Sirui 24mm t1.2 prime lens. And this is a manual focus lens and it's a cine lens. But not only is this affordable, but it will give you f or t 2.4 background blur, which is fine. That's, as nice as it's going to get for Micro Four Thirds. Now you can find lenses that are even faster than this, but they're sort of a hyper niche product. And I think T1.2 is fast enough for most applications. Say for example, I'm using this lens on the GH7 and I'm happy using manual focus here in the studio for a talk to camera piece, which I often am, then it's not going to look much different to full frame. And that's one of those things that often goes overlooked. So you can find really high quality glass for Micro Four Thirds with basically any focal length or price. And if you want to save a few bucks, even over this 9mm f1.7 lens, you can find a manual focus version of this from another brand for way less money. So keep all of those things in mind. But yeah, the lens selection really sells the system. All right, let's talk about more practical stuff now, starting with why I love using the GH7 in the studio. And this is a bit of a no-brainer, but there's a few things about this camera body design that I absolutely love. So first up, you can record all day as long as you want with no overheating. So that's fantastic. But it also works beautifully out to an external monitor thanks to the full-size HDMI port on the side. Now we get active cooling on this camera body, which is why it's a little bit thicker, but the fact I can run the camera into the external monitor, much like I am now, and not have any problems with running the camera in that scenario is excellent. I also love the fact that there's tally lights on the front, so I know exactly when I'm recording, or if I'm behind the camera, there's also a tally light near where your thumb sits over here, letting you know it's recording. You can also turn on a red record ring, which is another indication that comes up on screen that you're rolling, and all of these tools just make it easy. Over the years, I've done so many videos on any of my YouTube channels where I'm talking to the camera, I'm feeling the flow, and then I realize I'm not recording. It's really hard to miss that you're not recording on the GH7. Has it happened to me before? Probably, but it would have been outside on a bright sunny day. So yeah, if you're in the studio, you know exactly when you're recording, and having the access to be able to run this out to an external monitor is an awesome feature. It's something I use 100% of the time. Let's talk about the killer in-body image stabilization on the GH7, and this is one of those things that Micro Four Thirds has always had. It's always had great in-body image stabilization. Whether we're talking about the GH5, the GH5 Mark II, the Olympus OMD EM1 Mark II or 3, or probably their new cameras as well, you're going to get excellent in-body image stabilization. But even from the GH6, the GH7 took things to the next level. It has a new mode called E-stabilization, which allows you to set two separate modes, or three if you count off. So there's off, which is just the standard IBIS. There's E-stabilization on standard mode, which crops in only a little bit and gives you almost gimbal-like results. This is perfect for doing any sort of vlogging or handheld work if you're behind the camera following someone, for example. And this works best in a sort of straight line. If you're doing a lot of pans with this mode, it can look a little bit jittery. So just keep that in mind. And then there's high mode, which crops in a little bit more, but you can basically run with it and it looks like it's on a gimbal. It's GoPro levels of stabilization. So this is an awesome camera for anyone doing travel vlogs where you might be walking with the camera, in a sort of fixed position as you move. It's going to look really impressive. And again, the GH7 really makes this easy to get straight out of camera results, whereas other cameras, you'd have to process the footage through, their own app and then try to stabilize it and post and do all that kind of stuff. You don't have to with this, it just works. One of the things I've learned over the years is having reliable autofocus is of the utmost importance. So if you're in a situation where you're going to be talking to the camera or filming someone else, you just want the autofocus to work without it doing anything weird. The tracking subject detection modes in this camera are phenomenal. It will do everything from human, animal, train, plane, and vehicle detection, including motorcycles. And I just set it or leave it set up for human detection in any scenario where I'm addressing the camera, and it just works. It's super snappy and reliable. It's actually faster than the Sony FX30 that I had. It really pulls focus super fast. Now you can slow that down in the settings if you want a more cinematic focus pull, but if you just want fast, reliable, and repeatable autofocus, this camera, unlike the GH6, which was okay, has the best autofocus from Lumix as of right now in the Micro Four Thirds range. This and the G9 Mark II are essentially the same. So yeah, it's a killer camera, and this is one of the big advantages that GH7 has over prior GH camera releases. Over to frame rates, resolutions, and codecs. So the GH7 basically has everything. I'm going to talk about a few of the standouts for me. Being that this camera doesn't overheat no matter what I do to it, you can shoot your A roll at 4K 50 or 60 frames per second and just let it run. It's amazing for that. So if you want the most fluid looking footage, you can shoot your primary A roll shooting 4K 50 or 60p. Now, if you're unfamiliar with how the frame rates work, I'm in the PAL region. So here we get 25 and 50 frames per second as standards. Then the slow motion becomes 100 frames per second by default, unless we're in the slow motion mode. We'll talk about that as well. But if you're in North America or the NTSC regions, you'll be shooting either 24, 30, 60, or 120p. So that's kind of how that works. And if you take your camera with you overseas, change the refresh rate, which means you're not going to have any issues with light flicker coming up on your footage. Just a quick tip there if you're new to these cameras. The best thing about the footage out of the GH7 is whether you're shooting 4K, 30, 60, or 120p, the image quality looks identical, which is cool. So if you're outside shooting slow-mo and then you might be doing your A-roll at 4K, 30, or 60, for example, it's all going to look identical. There's no huge downgrade when you're shooting in the 4K 120p modes like you might find on other cameras. So yeah, the image quality out of this is excellent. I would have no problems recommending it. If you want to shoot above 4K, you can with this camera as well, which is great for sort of future-proofing projects and also kind of punching in on the timeline. So you can shoot up to 5.7K at 50 or 60p, which is frames per second. And you can also go all the way up to its open gate mode, shooting 5.8K. And this allows you to sort of reframe footage in post. It gives you a 4:3 aspect ratio, so you can kind of crop a vertical video out of it and get more information above the shot than you're seeing right now. Right now, I'm shooting with a 17:9 aspect ratio, which is not utilizing the full readout of the sensor. I should have probably shot this in open gate, but it is what it is. Either way, this allows you to do a whole bunch of cool stuff when it comes to creating social media content. The GH7 is a filmmaker's camera, so it gives you all the great tools, frame rates, resolutions, and codecs you could want for basically any application. And if you want to shoot RAW with this, you absolutely can, although it's overkill for YouTube. Don't tell the hipsters. Another reason why I recommend this camera for YouTube, odds are you're going to be shooting in a lot of the same scenarios a lot of the time. And you can completely customize this camera to work in the studio or out in the field thanks to the custom modes on the top. There's 4 quick menu options called C1, 2, 3, and 4, where you can set them up appropriately. So say, for example, I'm in the studio, I want to do a talk to camera piece like this. I can have it set to 4K at 25 or 30p if you live in North America, and then I can switch it over to C2 and have it set up to say 4K 50 or 60 frames per second. I'm still gonna get the same field of view here. It just gives me slow motion that I can then slow down in post-production or have it set up in camera to already be slowed down. And this is a time-saving thing. It stops you from having to go through the menus and always configure the camera in any shooting scenario. Say, for example, you're someone who's doing travel vlogs, then you can set this up in a way that works great. You might want 4K 60 as your primary shot, and then when you switch over to C2, you can set it up 4K at 120 frames per second, and outdoors you're going to get excellent quality slow motion that can be slowed down in post or in camera if you set it up appropriately. So that offers a whole range of different features. You can have one C1, 2, 3, or 4 with or without the E stabilization, and the next one with it on. So again, you can set it up in a way that works for you. The build quality of this camera is phenomenal, and I love the fact that the fully articulating screen not only flips around like this, but you can flip it back on itself and work with it in this position, which is one of my favorite ways to work behind the camera. So if you're someone who's going to spend a bit of time framing up shots like this, having it in this position as opposed to over like this is better ergonomically. I don't have to keep turning my head to the left. That was an exaggeration, but you get the point, right? So having it all lined up like this is much more ergonomic. The GH7 also supports CF Express Type B. Now, I sort of avoided using CF Express cards for a long time, but I went over to one recently when I got the GH7, and I'm like, man, why did I wait? They are so fast at transferring files. It's about 7 times faster to take files off the CF Express B card to a solid state drive than it is from a fast V90 SD card. It's so quick. I can transfer like 50 gig of files over in no time at all. So if that's important to you, it's great. But we also do get a UHS 2 card slot, which is basically an SD card slot. Now, if you just want to save some money and get that, you can. And I recommend V90 cards, and I'll link one of them down below. And that will allow you to record in most modes on the camera. But again, if you want to shoot RAW, you can go out over SSD or shoot to a CF Express B card. But just know doing that will fill up the card very quickly. So use it at your own risk. The last reason I'm going to recommend the GH7 as a great YouTuber camera is the fact you can power it in 3 different ways. So we've got our battery. This is the BLK22 battery. These have been around since the GH5 Mark II or S5, which is cool. So that's great. You can also power the camera indefinitely thanks to USB-C over here. Now, if you've got a power delivery charger, which I'll recommend down in the description as well, you can just let this run all day. But the way I like to run it is from a dummy battery, and that's how I'm running this camera, which we'll talk about in a moment. So you can just let this run all day in the studio, hooked up to a monitor, much like I am right now, and record as long as the media cards will stay full. So that's fantastic. It gives you a lot of different powering options. While this has been a huge love letter to the GH7, I'm going to talk about a few of the things that I don't love about it. So compared to other cameras from Lumix, as of right now, most of them have an S&Q dial on the top, which allows you to dial in footage that is slowed down or sped up in camera with no audio. So this is all done in camera. You don't need to put it on your computer and then slow it down in post-production. And if you're shooting a lot of clips with higher frame rates, having it all done in camera is fantastic. Unless, of course, you need audio. But to get into the variable frame rate mode, which is what it's called on the GH series of cameras, it's quite confusing if you're new to this particular camera, and it just requires a bit of learning on your behalf. So just keep that in mind. The great news is, though, you can just find 4K at 120 frames per second in the menu, or 4K 100, and then slow it down in post-production, and that will have audio, and that's easy to find. But yeah, the variable frame rate mode on this is definitely not as easy as S&Q. The next thing I don't love about the GH7 is the battery life. The battery life on this isn't great. You'll get just over an hour or so shooting 4K, 30 or 60p, and the higher resolutions you go and all that kind of stuff is the more the battery will drain. So get a few extra batteries if you're thinking about getting this camera. The last complaint I have about the GH7 is that the physical size and weight won't be for everybody. This is quite a chunky camera, but I tell you what, having active cooling for me personally makes a whole lot of sense. And yeah, I really love shooting with this camera outside because I know it's not going to fail. So that's the trade-off that I've made, but I know the size and weight won't be for everybody. Now, at the start of this video, I mentioned I was going to share with you a different camera in case this was out of your budget or if you don't like the size and weight of it. So there's an alternative to this that you can buy that will give you almost indistinguishable results in every mode, and it will also be smaller and lighter. And what is it? It's the G9 Mark II. So I'm shooting with the G9 Mark II right now, and this is a killer camera. Just know it doesn't give you active cooling, and the setup on it is slightly different to the GH7 overall. It won't shoot RAW, but it can do basically everything else the GH7 can do. So it's an absolute powerhouse. Now, I'm running this with the microphone, the XLR adapter that I mentioned earlier. I've got a HDMI cable plugged into my big monitor right beside the camera here, and it's great, it's working great. I'm also recording externally just for something different. So this is ProRes Cinema 4K 422 HQ at 25 frames per second. Why? Because I thought I'd test it out and see what it looks like in the studio. But you can get absolutely great results out of the G9 Mark II. Just know if you're going to be powering it and running it to an external monitor for a very long time or in a hot condition situation, it can overheat. But for most shooters, the G9 Mark II will be a great choice for vloggers or people who just want a portable camera. This has been so reliable. The G9 Mark II has only overheated on me once, and that was in direct sunlight on a really hot day. In the shade, up to 40 degrees Celsius, shooting in Perth, I never experienced overheating. So it's a use case thing. Just keep it out of direct sunlight for extended periods of time and you should be okay. But if you plan on rigging the camera out with monitors and all this other sort of power sources, then get the GH7, it will be more reliable. But this camera right here is still one of my favorites. It does everything really well. Thanks for watching.